I never thought a simple dinner invitation would be the exact moment my daughter decided she didn't need a mother anymore. Up until that Tuesday morning, I believed Sarah and I had a normal relationship. She was my only child, and since my husband passed away 7 years ago, I had done my best to support her marriage to David. I stayed out of their way, offered help when asked, and kept my opinions to myself. When Sarah called to invite me to lunch at an upscale downtown restaurant, my heart felt light. She mentioned that David's parents, the Prestons, were visiting from out of state and wanted to have a nice family gathering. It had been months since I last sat down with my daughter for a proper meal. I spent a good hour picking out a modest, tailored navy blue dress. I didn't want to overdo it, but I wanted to look respectable. I clasped a simple pearl necklace around my neck, grabbed my purse, and took a taxi to the address she provided. The restaurant was the kind of place where the waiters wore crisp black vests, and the lighting was intentionally dim. Crystal glasses sparkled on snow-white tablecloths. I gave my name to the hostess, who guided me toward a large, round booth near the back of the dining room. Sarah and David were already seated laughing alongside a sharply dressed older couple. Mrs. Preston wore a silk blouse that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, and Mr. Preston was checking a heavy gold watch. I approached the table with a warm smile, ready to greet the family I shared through my daughter's marriage. I reached out to place my hand on the back of the empty chair next to Sarah. I expected a hug, or at least a polite introduction. Instead, I watched my daughter's smile vanish. She leaned in close to me, her voice dropping to a harsh, urgent whisper that stopped me completely in my tracks. "Sit at the other table," Sarah muttered, blocking the empty chair with her elbow. "My in-laws are classy, and you're not." For a fraction of a second, I thought I had misheard her over the soft jazz playing through the ceiling speakers. I looked at David, hoping he might correct his wife or offer an apologetic smile. He simply picked up his water glass and looked out the window, completely ignoring me. Mrs. Preston was busy inspecting the appetizer menu, pretending the awkward exchange wasn't happening right in front of her. I didn't argue, I didn't ask why, and I certainly didn't cry. My husband used to say that forcing yourself into a space where you aren't wanted is the fastest way to lose your dignity. I simply nodded. "Enjoy your lunch," I murmured. I turned my back on them and walked over to a small two-person table near the kitchen doors. A confused waiter hurried over to hand me a menu. I didn't bother opening it. I ordered a bowl of tomato soup and a glass of ice water. From my corner, I could hear the bursts of laughter coming from their large booth. They ordered towers of seafood, expensive bottles of wine, and artisan breads. My name was not mentioned once. When my soup arrived, I ate it slowly. I didn't feel angry yet. I just felt a profound, heavy clarity. When I finished the last spoonful, I caught the waiter's attention and asked for my check. I left a generous cash tip on the table, picked up my purse, and walked out the front doors into the bright afternoon sun. I hailed a taxi and watched the city streets roll by in complete silence, unaware that my phone was about to ring with a very expensive problem. My house was quiet when I unlocked the front door. I slipped off my shoes, hung my keys on the rack, and walked into the kitchen to make a pot of tea. The rhythmic hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. I had just poured the boiling water into my favorite ceramic mug when my cell phone started vibrating aggressively on the counter. It was Sarah. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Mom, where did you go?" She practically screamed into the speaker. I took a slow sip of my tea. "I went home." "Sarah." I finished my soup. "Are you kidding me right now?" She gasped, her voice shrill with panic. "You need to come back here immediately." The waiter just dropped the check. "It's almost $900. "That sounds like a wonderful meal," I replied smoothly. "Mom, stop it. David's parents thought we were paying, and we thought they were paying. We don't have this kind of money in our checking account right now. You need to come back and put this on your credit card. The manager is looking at us. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out at my small, well-kept garden. For years, I had been the silent safety net. I paid for the unexpected car repairs, the sudden dental bills, and the little emergencies that seemed to follow David and Sarah everywhere. They always assumed I would simply absorb the cost of their lifestyle. I paid for my soup, Sarah, I stated calmly. You can't do this to me in front of them. It's humiliating, she sobbed. You chose your table, I answered. Now you have to pay for what you ordered. I ended the call and turned off the phone completely. As the screen went dark, I realized this wasn't just about a restaurant bill. It was about everything. The next morning, I was kneeling in the dirt, pruning my rose bushes, when I heard the heavy crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. Sarah's car jerked to a stop. She slammed the door and marched toward the house. I stayed exactly where I was, carefully snipping a dead bloom from the stem. I heard the front door unlock. She had used her spare key. Are you out of your mind? Sarah yelled, storming straight through the living room and out the back door onto the patio. Do you have any idea what you put us through yesterday? We had to call David's brother to transfer us money so we could leave that restaurant? The Prestons think we're completely broke. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my gardening apron, and walked past her into the kitchen to wash my hands. She followed right on my heels, her face flushed with entitlement. You embarrassed me, Mom. You abandoned us when we needed you. She tossed her handbag onto the kitchen island. Beside it, she carelessly dropped her keychain. I dried my hands on a towel, walked over to the counter, and smoothly unhooked the silver spare key to my front door from her ring. I dropped it into the pocket of my apron. Sarah froze, watching my hand. What are you doing? Updating my security, I answered lightly. You're taking my key because of one argument. She scoffed, crossing her arms. I'm taking my key because this is my home, I corrected her. And people who are embarrassed by me do not get free access to my property. You should leave now. Sarah stared at my pocket, finally realizing that the rules of my house had just permanently changed. After Sarah stormed out, slamming the door behind her, I sat down at my small desk in the corner of the living room. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out my financial ledger. My husband and I had always been frugal, investing our savings into stable index funds and maintaining a comfortable debt-free life. When David struggled to keep a steady job during the first few years of their marriage, I silently picked up several of their monthly expenses to ease the burden. It became a habit they clearly mistook for an obligation. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank portal. First, I found the autopay setup for Sarah's premium cell phone plan. I clicked Cancel Autopay. Next, I navigated to the car insurance policy. I had been covering both her and David's vehicles for 3 years. I removed my banking information from the account entirely. Finally, I went to my primary credit card account, where Sarah was listed as an authorized user for emergencies. Given that she had tried to use me as an emergency fund for a luxury banquet, that privilege was officially revoked. I clicked Remove Authorized User. I closed the laptop and took a deep breath. I didn't feel malicious, and I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I was finally cleaning out a closet that had been cluttered for far too long. It only took 3 clicks of a mouse to undo 5 years of unappreciated generosity, and I knew exactly how long it would take for the storm to hit. It took exactly 2 days. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the morning breeze with a crossword puzzle, when my landline rang inside the house. I took my time walking to the kitchen to answer it. Mom, there is something wrong with the bank. Sarah's voice barked through the receiver. The background noise sounded like a busy grocery store. The rhythmic beep of a checkout scanner echoed behind her. Good morning to you too, Sarah. I'm at Whole Foods and the backup card was declined. She hissed clearly, trying to keep her voice down so the cashier wouldn't hear. Did you freeze the account? Unfreeze it right now. I have a cart full of groceries, and people are staring at me. I didn't freeze the account, I replied, keeping my tone perfectly level. I removed your name from it. You are no longer an authorized user. Dead silence on the other end. What she finally whispered, "You can't do that without telling me. How am I supposed to pay for this? With your own money, Sarah. You and David are adults with jobs. You sit at the classy table now. Remember, classy people pay for their own organic produce. You are doing this to punish me," she cried out. "I am doing this to protect my finances," I corrected her. "I also canceled the auto pay for your phones and your car insurance. You'll need to set those up with your own debit card before the end of the month." Mom, wait. You can't? I placed the receiver gently back onto the cradle. For the first time in her 32 years, my daughter was going to have to pay for her own lifestyle. And her reaction was something I would never forget. Less than 20 minutes later, Sarah's car skidded into my driveway. I was already prepared. I had locked the heavy wooden front door and closed the reinforced glass storm door. I stood in the hallway, watching her march up the steps and furiously jiggle the doorknob. When she realized it was locked, she banged the flat of her hand against the glass. I walked forward and unlatched the wooden door, but left the locked storm door firmly shut between us. "Open this door right now," Sarah demanded, her face pale with stress. "We can talk perfectly well like this," I said. "You are being incredibly cruel, Mom. Over one little comment at a restaurant. You're cutting off our insurance. David is furious." Yes, I looked right into her eyes, refusing to absorb her panic. "It wasn't a comment, Sarah. It was a revelation. You showed me exactly where I stand in your life. I am a wallet and a convenience. Nothing more. That's not true. You're my mother. A mother you hid in the corner so your in-laws wouldn't be embarrassed," I reminded her softly. "You wanted independence from my image, but you still wanted access to my bank account. You cannot have both." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. The truth is a heavy thing when it finally lands. Go home, Sarah. Figure out your budget with your husband. I closed the heavy wooden door, shutting out her protests. As I walked back to my kitchen, I felt a strange lightness in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced since my husband passed away. Over the next few weeks, I heard nothing directly from my daughter, but news travels fast in a small social circle. I ran into Mary, a longtime family friend, at the local pharmacy. After some polite small talk, Mary leaned in close. "I heard Sarah and David are having a rough patch," Mary whispered. I just smiled pleasantly. "Is that so?" Mary nodded eagerly. "David's car got repossessed last week. Apparently, they missed the insurance payments and the loan company found out. They had to ask David's parents for a loan to cover their rent. I hope the Prestons were able to help them," I said neutrally. Mary scoffed. "Are you kidding? The Prestons told them they need to learn fiscal responsibility and refused to give them a dime. They packed up and flew back to their vacation home in Florida. Sarah has been working extra shifts at the clinic just to keep the lights on." I thanked Mary for the chat and walked out to my car. I didn't feel joy at my daughter's struggle, but I didn't feel the urge to swoop in and save her either. Without my invisible financial padding, the lifestyle Sarah and David had projected to the world completely crumbled. The classy in-laws she had chosen to impress had abandoned her the second she stopped looking like a successful, wealthy woman. The illusion of their perfect life was cracking, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she showed up at my doorstep again. It was raining on a quiet Thursday evening when I saw Sarah walking up my driveway. She didn't march this time. Her shoulders were slumped and she wore a plain gray sweater instead of her usual designer jackets. She didn't knock aggressively. She just stood under the porch awning, shivering slightly. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch, leaving the door cracked behind me. "Hi, Mom," she muttered, staring at her shoes. "Hello, Sarah." She let out a shaky breath. "We're drowning. The rent went up. David's car is gone, and his parents won't even answer our calls anymore. They said we're an embarrassment." She finally looked up at me, her eyes tired and red. "We need to consolidate our debt, but our credit is ruined. We just need you to co-sign a personal loan for us. Just this once to get back on track. I promise we'll pay every cent." I looked at the daughter I had raised, seeing the exhaustion on her face. A year ago, I would have signed the paperwork without looking at the interest rate. "No," I said, simply. Her face crumbled. "Mom, please. We have nowhere else to go. I am not an ATM, Sarah, and I am not a backup plan for when the Prestons let you down." I told her firmly. "You and David need to downsize, sell what you don't need, and work your way out of this. That is how you build a real life." Sarah looked at me, waiting for the mother who always gave in, but that woman was gone. 6 months passed. The crisp autumn air turned into a bitter winter and finally softened into a bright, promising spring. As the seasons changed, so did my daily routine. I stopped waiting around for the phone to ring. Instead, I transformed the overgrown patch in my backyard into a thriving vegetable garden, spending my mornings with my hands in the soil. I joined a local watercolor painting class, finding a quiet joy in mixing colors and focusing on myself. More importantly, I started hosting a weekly book club in my living room. For the first time in years, my house was full of genuine laughter warmth and people who actually wanted to sit at my table without expecting my wallet to be open. Sarah and I occasionally spoke, though the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. The conversations were brief and cautious, mostly polite text messages on holidays, or 5-minute phone calls, just to check in. Word reached me through the grapevine that the financial reality of their choices had hit them hard. Without my credit cards and silent subsidies, she and David were forced to break their luxury townhouse lease. They moved into a much smaller, older walk-up apartment on the noisy edge of town. To make ends meet, they were both working full-time, finally paying their own utility bills, buying their own groceries, and managing the gritty details of their own lives. She stopped asking me for money. Not a single request for a loan or a temporary fix. I suspect she finally understood that the boundary I set was made of solid stone, and no amount of guilt-tripping would break it. One sunny Sunday afternoon, I was busy setting out a spread of cucumber sandwiches and freshly squeezed lemonade on my dining table for my book club friends. The house smelled of lemon and old paper. Suddenly, the front doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door to find a delivery man holding a small, very modest bouquet of yellow daisies. They weren't the extravagant orchids Sarah used to buy with my money. They were simple, inexpensive, and likely paid for with her own hard-earned cash. I took the glass vase and slipped out the little white card tucked carefully into the green stems. It read, "Thinking of you, Sarah." I smiled gently and placed the daisies on the kitchen counter where they could catch the afternoon light. I didn't reach for my phone to call her immediately. I didn't gush over the gesture or invite her over for an emotional, tearful reunion. Trust takes time to rebuild, and true respect is earned through consistent actions, not just a $10 bouquet. It was a step forward, but I was in no rush. The doorbell rang again this time, announcing my friends. I walked back to my dining room as the women began to arrive, instantly filling the house with cheerful chatter and genuine affection. I took my seat at the head of my own table, poured myself a cold glass of lemonade, and listened to the joyful noise around me. I felt a deep, unwavering sense of peace. I was exactly where I belonged. If you loved this story about setting hard boundaries and taking back your self-worth, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know down in the comments. How would you have handled that restaurant bill?